Welcome back to the Daily Leader Podcast. I am Taylor Jessup, alongside here Brad McDonald, my co-host, who's going to be introducing our guest today, Brandon Schaefer. But before we get to that, couple shout outs that we always like to do. Jesus with Video Pilot. Man, he's killer for any of your video needs. If you are in the podcasting world, please do look him up. Special shout out to April Norris, who has helped us with all of our sound needs for this episode. And we are not recording at the department today, but typically we always give a little cheers to the Department 56. Thank you guys for all that you do. If you are interested in looking for a place to rent out a spot to podcast, please check them out. And with that, Brad, would you want to go for it? I know you've got a special relationship with our guest here today, and just want to kick it over to you.
Taylor, solid intro. I like how that's improved incrementally, episode by episode. I'm not going to lie.
You know, I do. I watch a lot of like ESPN, so I just try and see how like Scott Van Pelt does his intros. That's my goal.
The funniest part of what you just said is that I don't know who Scott Van Pelt is.
No, you have no idea. If
So just
we talked Brock Purdy before you got here, who is one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now, and I bet you have no idea what team he's on or what college, what university he played for. But you should know as a result of who our guest is.
With that said, I am honored to introduce Brandon Schaefer. Brandon is the CEO of Five Capitals. He is the founder of Five Capitals. He's also got some other really awesome projects. One, Legacy Stone, helping families to develop their own legacy. Another, Hammock Coast Life. They're in beautiful Pawleys Island, South Carolina, in the Myrtle Beach area, helping people on vacation get connected to great experiences as well as wonderful places to stay. I had the opportunity to go to Pawleys Island for the first time this fall and had an incredible experience. So want to make sure I highlight those organizations that Brandon has founded and is working in. Brandon got a degree in business from Iowa State University. He also went to Indiana Wesleyan University, where he pursued graduate studies, and then finally Asbury Theological Seminary, where he rounded out his education. Brandon's had a really exciting and interesting career working not only for Eli Lilly and Motorola, but also in some really interesting faith-based nonprofit contexts, and then as well as executive coaching and consulting. And so that's Brandon's resume, and it's really awesome to get to share that with you guys. I think, though, as wonderful as those experiences have been, and as much value as Brandon has offered to all the people in his life through that education and that experience, Brandon is a good man, and he's a fantastic leader. Not only is he gifted, but he's also incredibly skilled. And so it's really fun for me to get to have this opportunity to share Brandon with anyone who watches or listens to this episode, because Brandon's had such a profound impact on my own life. And recently, Brandon, you and I were reminiscing a little bit about some of those early coaching opportunities, early coaching calls where I was just getting involved. You connected me with a former Five Capitals coach, Craig Cheney, out of Kansas City, who really just spent a year developing me and helping me to grow and to learn what leadership is, how it works, and why it's so important. And so I can say that, the Daily Leader podcast, the conversations that we're having with leaders such as yourself, are a direct result of the impact you've had on my life. And so for that, I'm very grateful. But without any further ado, fill in some of the gaps here. Tell us a little bit about your journey, what got you to where you're at today, and what are some of the main things that you're focusing on right now as you lead others and develop leaders across the world.
Yeah, so great to be with you guys. Thanks so much for that fantastic intro. Really, really fun to be with both of you, and love the heart you have and what you're going after, inspiring and equipping leaders day in, day out, and just honored to be on here with you guys as well. So my journey was really a product of what I thought growing up was supposed to be what made you arrive. And so, growing up as a farm kid in Iowa, probably watching the big screen, movies and Wall Street, Hollywood, New York. And so, a corporate 100 job is what I felt like was supposed to be what we were supposed to be, striving for. And so, um, going to Iowa State, landing a job with Motorola, corporate development, working overseas, living overseas. But as my faith deepened and I realized kind of how God wired me and what was important from a kingdom perspective, it was a slow journey of rewiring what uh, kingdom impact is, what making a difference is. And so I moved from this sense of like image and achievement and kind of corporate success to it's about making disciples. It's about really advancing the kingdom. Your kingdom come, your will be done. And what are you uniquely wired and put on this earth to make a dent in the universe for and about? And so that led me away from the corporate world and into full-time ministry, and then from full-time ministry realizing, gosh, leaving the corporate world of training and development and getting to do that on my own, launching Five Capitals 15 years ago, which is really about coaching and consulting, which is really about making disciples who make disciples, finding my unique ability and niche. And we're all on this journey of kind of self discovery, which needs to be in parallel of God discovery. Without that part, it's just kind of narcissism and self awareness. But when you do it that in a way that's spirit led, you're always going deeper in how God wired you, who He's called you to, and how best to live that out. And I'm on the next evolutions of that journey, even today.
That's fantastic. One of the things that, as you share, uh, really gets highlighted to me from all the training that I've received from you and from the team at Five Capitals is this idea of purpose, right? So oftentimes we talk about the five capitals, other times we talk about the five priorities. Everything I heard you say to me just sort of screams purpose. Like you've got this really strong sense of purpose. What would you say is just critical for leaders to understand about purpose? Or we could also say spiritual capital as another way of talking about that same principle. How would you kind of teach us about what that means for a leader to have a strong sense of purpose?
Yeah, purpose. When you're talking about it from a corporate perspective, I think every leader needs three things. They need a 20-year vision. What are they going for long term, right? So in 20 years, what's the good you've brought to the world?
Hmm.
And that needs to align with things that we would see in Scripture. It can look a number of different ways. Jesus was so creative as it relates to the way he communicated the good news of the gospel. Whether it's "I'll give you living water, light of the world," "I'm the vine, you're the branches." So many creative metaphors, but really saying the same thing. And so there needs to be a resolute 20-year vision that you're going after, begin with the end in mind. There needs to be uncompromising values that get you up every morning and keep and protect you. And so we work with leaders on three core values that you're going to live out each and every day. And then I believe there also needs to be a mission statement, so every day dot, dot, dot. So every leader should be able to communicate where they're going, big picture, long term. And that is a discernment filter that helps them decide, what am I say yes to? What am I going to say no to? We talk about your heaven yes and your hell no. And your values, your uncompromising values, 3 to 5. And then every day what does that look like for you?
Yeah.
So
No,
that would be,
that's
and it takes a while. You got to think through what breaks your heart, what you're passionate about,
hmm,
what ticks you off. That's injustices of the world. All those things, we call them passions, possessions, and problems, should come together in the dent you want to make in the universe, the good you want to bring to the world, each and every day.
I love that. I love that. There, so much of that just purpose is just coming out in all of your statements. I love that framework. And when you're talking about that, I'd love to hear, because it seems like your purpose, what you have been going after, right, led you to the creation of launching Five Capitals. So, I mean, in that, could you just tell us a little bit of the story? I know Five Capitals has been so important to Brad, and our conversations and journey. So, can you just tell us a little bit about the launching of Five Capitals, How did you get there?
Yeah, so there were three pivotal moments. First is Campus Crusade for Christ. So I became a Christian my sophomore year at Iowa State. I was in a fraternity brother. Fraternity. A fraternity brother took me to. He was a great committed Christian. He took me to a Campus Crusade outreach night at Iowa State, and that night ruined me for good, right, in all the right ways. And so it was a classic kind of bring a friend night. Gospel was preached. I put my hand up. I went to the front, and for the next 3 years, Campus Crusade discipled me, and I saw incredible change in my life and incredible change in the other people in my small group life. And so I was a part of the Greek community outreach to fraternities and sororities. Our goal was to start Bible studies, multiple Bible studies, in all the fraternities and sororities on campus. And I just saw the power of intentional investment. And
Mm,
so when I went to work for Motorola, because I still had that kind of this is the pinnacle of life in my head, I went the non-technical route. I went into training and development, and on the training and development side, I'm like, wow, this is essentially discipleship. We're not overtly teaching the Bible, but I saw that as I kind of rose up in the ranks of training and development. If you take a mediocre manager and you believe in them and you coach them and you bring the right content that they need, you can help someone who is kind of floundering at a
mm,
4 or a 5 and get them to a 7, an 8, or a 9. And again, it was reinforced in a more secular way, the power of discipleship. And of course, that's Jesus's, last word on the matter. And so fast forward when God calls me into ministry, I'm associate pastor of this large church, and we're talking about programs. I said, hey, who's investing in the business leaders, the Christian business leaders within this church? And everyone kind of turned their heads, and that was a gap that I identified was missing. So I said, all right, well, let's reach out and let's start a business leader small group curriculum, business leader monthly gathering, and let's, because I knew what it was like being in the corporate world, feeling like when I went to church, it was all about my personal life. Well, what about, work was God's idea. We're so often talking about don't take your work home. Well, what about taking your home to work? So clear in my identity, my Christian values, that I find ways to integrate my biblical framework, my faith into my business, not cannibalize it or compartmentalize it. So that's really where Five Capitals got started, is really investing in business leaders after I'd left the corporate world with all
mm,
these tools and frameworks and discipleship convictions. And so we started discipleship small groups. I started working with CEOs and teams kind of on the side. And that's really where Five Capitals, you could say, almost accidentally was birthed. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, I get to bring my faith. I get to bring my seminary degree. I get to bring all these biblical tools and frameworks to these Christian CEOs and their teams. And I don't have the 500-pound gorilla of a Lilly or a Motorola and all that bureaucracy and meetings. And so I just saw such freedom, but also such impact. And I said, man, I want to do this full time. And
yeah.
so started Five Capitals coaching and consulting, and quickly I was full in terms of client load. And it's like, okay, well, God never wants addition. He always wants multiplication. Out of many
Mm,
branches come all the grapes. It's a harvest 30, 60, 100 fold. And so I immediately said, okay, so we need a certification program. We need to raise up more coaches, that get this vision of discipleship in the workplace and helping leaders go after all God has for them in life. And so it was that kind of philosophy of multiplication and that conviction of discipleship that really got things going in those early days. And everything worth doing is worth doing badly. Have a go. I probably wasn't that great of a coach. God was gracious at the beginning.
mm,
I know certification was horrible at the beginning, looking back to where it is today. But when you're passionate and convicted about something, you just got to go for it,
mm,
and trust that there'll be grace to grow and make it better. And that's what we did in those early
yeah.
days, especially.
I love how kind of your purpose and your passion just seemed to mesh, and at that point, it seemed like you could do a lot of work, right? That's kind of an exciting way to wake up. I know that those are really fun things to have grow, and I love the line you said. You said something really great: is the power of intentional investment. I really like that idea. I think that's super powerful. I think that clearly your experience taught you that there was a void there, right? Intentional investment in terms of church and corporate world and in leadership. I think that that can be a real gap, that we're not always super intentional with how we want to lead our teams and our businesses and all those kind of things. Sometimes it just happens. So I really appreciate you sharing that story. I think it's super cool. It's amazing to see how much it's grown. Can you tell us a little bit, just for our listeners that may or may not be familiar and may or may not have read your book yet, right here, which I've got, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But can you just talk about briefly the five capitals framework, um, and both kind of like what led you, what is it, and then what kind of led you to that?
I'll start with what led me to it. There are so many leaders I found, Christian leaders who really only got their life together on Sunday, like really felt like their
Yeah.
life was in order on Sunday, kind of God first, and then maybe taking the family out for lunch, and then let's all watch football together, play in the backyard, and then kind of play, rest, plan, get ready for the next day. And
Mm,
most of the leaders I talked to felt really good about Sunday, but then if they were honest, felt like they were living a different or compartmentalized life Monday through Friday. It was about
Mm.
chasing the almighty dollar, kind of arrogance, ambition, getting ahead, and they didn't like it, right? It's like, man, why do I feel so worn out, mediocre most days, and only feel like I'm winning and getting it right on one day? Like, how does Monday feel like Sunday?
hmm,
And so we're always trying to take the Bible and make it real, practical, and relevant. That's the three things we want with
mm,
every leader we work with. And so it's a lot of hard work to kind of think through how to apply it. What's the visual tool, the framework? And so one of the frameworks early on was a concept called the five capitals. And it basically said that um, Jesus the builder, who knows how to build your life and business better than you do, is someone you need to get to know. Not just Jesus the Savior, Jesus the Messiah, Jesus the healer, right? But Jesus the builder. And it's all based on the parable of the wise and foolish builder, which is the last um, story or teaching that Jesus shares in the Sermon on the Mount. So he
mm,
gives this big sermon, turns everything on its head, and he says, listen, at the end of the day, if that's all too overwhelming for you, it's just about this. I can boil it down to this. The wise builder hears God's voice and puts it into practice. It's about having the humility to hear each and every day, and then the courage to obey, because my ways aren't your ways. But if you do that every day, right? Humility and courage, hearing and doing, then you will build your house like on a rock. And storms will come, but you'll be able to weather those storms and continue to lead a life of fulfillment, of resilience, of breakthrough, day in, day out, trusting me. And so we said, well, to invest that way is a form of capital, and it's spiritual capital. And every day for your business, for your family, for your employees, for strategy, you need to be doing just that, hearing and doing. It's universal. It can be applied everywhere. And that's the first capital. It's spiritual capital. It's intimacy and obedience with God, because that's Jesus' prayer for us, right? Father, may they be one as you and I are one, in John 17. But that's just one of the five. All right. The next one, of course, is relational capital. Right. We're not in this individual journey with God. It's a communal journey. It's the body of Christ. And this is a big one and a hard one, because we're also inherently individualistic in America, right? We've got the Bill of Rights and our own cars and white picket fences. But
that's
it's
right.
about love God, love people. And so relational capital is all about health and productivity in relationships. And the shadow side is toxicity and busyness. And it's a good time to be talking about this going into the holidays, because we all have challenging family relationships. We all have a crazy uncle, a weird cousin, a brother no one talks to, whatever it may be,
A
right?
friend
It's
named Brad
hardest at
McDonald.
home, right. So it's hardest at home. So um we want to be healthy and productive in our working relationships as well as our home and family
Mm,
relationships. And so it's spiritual capital, relational capital. The third one is physical capital. It's all about energy and hours. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. Time is the great equalizer, and we have to manage our time well. And whether you're the Pope, the president, or people like you and me, we all have this reality of one life to live. And what are we going to do with that life?
mm,
So it's spiritual, relational, physical, and then the last two are intellectual and financial. Intellectual capital is about wisdom and power. All wisdom comes from God. He gives us the power of new ideas and insights. It's about keeping an open mind, not get arrogant or apathetic, thinking we've arrived, or that we know it all. And then the last one, financial capital, is about stewardship and generosity. Stewarding well what God's given us, trusting that if we do that well, He'll give us more. And then being generous with our time, talent, and treasure because God owns it all anyway. And so it sounds great, like, oh, okay, yeah, spiritual, relational, physical, intellectual, financial. The catch is that most people live their life in a different order, and that's what trips them up, right? If you put money over purpose, you'll lose your way. If you chase kind of every new idea, every shiny object in light of what you're called to, you'll chase everything and nothing. You value your time more than people all the time. People will see you as arrogant and stingy, and that's really what was happening. Going back to my original conversation, or the topic is that people only had their capitals in order certain days of the week, and then they were living their life for money or achievement or whatever, selfishness, and God kind of was on the back burner, and no wonder they're living a lesser or mediocre life. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? You can put God first and at the center each and every day. Trust Him, going after what He's called you to, listening well, being obedient, taking great care of people, loving them well, working well together, doing conflict well. All right. And you can experience and move towards a sense of life to the full Monday through Sunday, not just one day.
I love the John 10:10 coming in at the end. Is one of my all-time favorite scripture verses, and I know talk about it here in the book. But that challenge, I mean, for me, all the time of keeping those in the correct order is really hard, right? I don't know why. I think I've gotten a little bit better at it, but for me, it's super challenging. A, to have the awareness first of where am I actually at. Seems like a challenge, and then B, getting them in the right order. But I love that you just kind of shared that the idea is, hey, you can have that. You can have the abundant life, but the abundant life works a lot better if you have these in the right order every day of the week to the best of your ability. So I love that framework. I think it's awesome. You guys can always pick up this copy of Build a Better Life here. I'm sure it'll be in our show notes as well. As we keep talking, I think Brad's got some more questions kind of drilling down on leadership a little bit as we talk about the daily leader here. Brad, you want to keep going?
Obviously, the five capitals framework has been transformational for me, and I've been really living into this framework honestly for the last 10 years now. Is when I was originally exposed to it. And I find that as a leader in leadership situations and relationships, it's very effective at aligning priorities, at creating a common language, and at helping people to balance and integrate both questions of work and questions of life. Brandon, when you think about leadership in a variety of frameworks, obviously there's significantly more frameworks than just the five capitals framework itself. What is leadership from your perspective? And what are some of the key tools that leaders need to be aware of in order to be most effective at leading themselves, others, and teams?
I'd caveat a bit to say, hey, well, what's leadership from a biblical perspective? I think,
Okay.
first and foremost is you've got to have a God-given vision, right? Leaders are out in front. They got to be at the front of the parade, and it has to be a vision that's large enough and compelling enough that other people want to get under it, want to get behind it, want to get under it. Because if not, then you're not a leader, right? John Maxwell says leadership is influence, and so I think that's fine, but then there's a lot of caveats, right? You're influencing because you've got something passionate about, something you're going for. Leadership, I think, from a biblical perspective, has to solve a problem. There has to be some problem of evil in the world that you're bringing leadership to. And so I think, and leadership has to have a kind of roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty component to it, that is so important. And that's why I love, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd hears the Father's voice. So there's that God-given vision that he's hearing from God, and then he leads the sheep, right? So leadership only comes in the context of hearing well from God. And so now we're back to that wise builder. And I think God will give every single person that gives their life to Christ a vision for their home, vision for their kids, vision for their community. As you get in the Word and spend time with Him, there will be downloads of both identity and calling. God is always faithful for a clear next step in those two areas. You see it all throughout Scripture. The caveat is we want 5 steps or 10 steps, or at least I do anyway, right? But oftentimes, because the goal is intimacy and then obedience, right? Not strategy. Oftentimes, he'll only give what is the next thing for you to do. Give us this day our daily bread. And so,
Mm.
leadership is about something that solves a problem of evil in the world. It's about a uniqueness that's given specifically to you, given a context that you've got faith for, and then it's otherness, right? All the one another's in Scripture, right? So it's loving one another, serving one another, forgiving another, and a big component, I think, of biblical leadership. Once you have a vision and there's a bit of a path and plan forward, a context, it's then recruiting the team, because we see Jesus casting vision, right? All right, repent and believe, the kingdom of God is near, Mark chapter 1, and then immediately engaging others looking for that team. And once he's kind of interacted with enough people, he spends all night praying, right? All night praying and fasting. And then 12 hours later, he picks the 3 and the 12. And now away we go, because now he can both bring good and teach the few. That's the back and forth that we see. Bringing good and teaching the few, because Jesus really only needed to do and did do 2 things, right? 2 things, right? And he didn't need to do 3, and he couldn't do 1. He had to do 2. He had to defeat the cross and raise up the 12. Those 2 things. Defeating the cross creates a pathway for salvation for all of us. Raising up the 12 means that the New Testament church continues. Right? Can you imagine if he raised up the 12, but he didn't defeat the cross? Right? Or if he defeats the cross, but there's no 12, right? Where's the book of Acts and beyond? Right? And so we need to be thinking about that as well, right? Bringing forth good, our version of breakthrough, right? And raising up others to do the same, right? Those 2 things have to be first and foremost in our minds as leaders. If not, I think we're missing it to some extent.
That's really good. One of the things that I think about in response to that is if you could, and I'll frame it in this way, if you could just teach one leadership framework, if you had kind of one bullet in the gun, so to speak, what would that framework be? Where would you hang your hat on? This is the framework that every leader needs to know in order to be most effective.
I've already talked about hearing and doing, right? So we've got a
Mm-hmm.
matrix that talks about humility and courage. And if you're only hearing but not being obedient, you're kind of like that seminary professor, right? That kind of classic, like, knowledge beyond their obedience, right? I've
Yep.
had many of those professors. At the same time, if you're kind of banging away doing, you're going to burn out or blow up, because God has a unique idea for every season. And you think about Joshua and how different each battle was. If Joshua had said, "Okay, I got it," I'm just gonna, every enemy, I'm just gonna walk around the wall 7 times. No, that was only for once, right? Every season, every battle we go through is different, and
That's good.
that's why that intimacy is so important. So I think that's one. There's a tool I learned from a mentor that talks about the 3 dimensions that we need in life: an upward relationship with God, that's the hearing and doing. We need inward communal relationships with others. That's that discipling community, iron sharpens iron piece. But then we need it out. We need to be engaging with the world outwardly. And that's just such a good framework, because I think all of us default to 1, maybe 2, if left to our own devices.
Sure.
And so we need to be pushed in all 3 of those directions. And we need to be held accountable to make sure we're having conversations with the world, with non Christians, with our neighbors, and held accountable to discipling relationships, and that our relationship with God is continually refreshed and strong.
As you work with leaders, Brandon, not only I know you're still doing some client work, not as much as you used to because you're leading multiple organizations, but as you work with clients who are running businesses, running ministries globally, US, Australia, UK, South America, I know you're spread all across the globe, and you work with leaders in your own organizations that you're founding and helping lead. Tell me some of the key struggles that you see repeating, whether it's across industries, uh, across continents, or um, even specific types of businesses or ministries. What are the things that you just universally see leaders constantly struggle with, or challenges that they might be struggling to overcome?
Yeah, so four things, and that come to mind. And you asked, put this question in an email, so I have a little time to think about it. Universally, I see people forget to invest in their teams.
Mm,
Discipleship, whether you call it coaching your team, mentoring your team, it's something that's always important, rarely urgent, and it always catches up with you over time. The best leaders consistently disciple their direct reports, and they reap the rewards a hundredfold. And it's so easy to kind of do it for a season and then forget, get busy. But those mentoring sessions, group, read a book together, podcast, it can look in a number of different forms, one-on-one, group, whatnot. But the leaders that consistently invest bear the most fruit and reap the most rewards, and it's the easiest to lose. It's hard to do, right? Intentional discipleship, mentoring, coaching, whatever you want to call it, it's hard to do. I think it's one of the reasons why it was Jesus's last words on the matter. He could have said anything, right? Therefore, go and serve. Therefore, go and lead. So that's one I see. Two is, it's so easy for leaders to get distracted. It's the thing I probably get paid the best to do, is to just keep people on track. All right, they want to talk to me about politics and election cycle and wars and economy and immigration, and it's like, hey, we just spent 20 minutes on things that have nothing to do with your business model, your current reality, and
mm,
your context. Like, distraction is everywhere. Entertainment, streaming, news, technology, AI. I see people get so easily distracted, and it kills productivity and focus. And
it's
as
very
the
good.
leader goes, so goes the organization. So to the level you're distracted, you're giving permission for everyone else. What you tolerate, you promote. And so you have to increase the level of discipline of what you choose to take in and focus on, because people are demanding your attention all the time. The third thing I see, especially post COVID, is just no rest. Revelation happens on retreat. Creative ideas happen when you get away, and so many leaders are trying to kind of skirt this reality, and you just can't afford that. If you're at the tip of the sword for your organization, they're looking for you to come up with the creative ideas, the rested strategy, the insights, the innovation. And if you don't do it, no one else will, right?
Wow.
Because you're the leader. And so a lack of rest across the board, and the consequences of that, I see all the time, uh, post post COVID. And then I see a lot of people lately giving up on collaboration. We're better together. I
Mm,
believe that, and the the groups that have achieved the most post COVID, kind of gotten back on the horse, are the people that have figured out how to collaborate strategically with other organizations that complement in ways that are a weakness or a blind spot or not a core competency for them. And it's hard. Partnerships are hard, but they're worth it. And so the collaborators and the Fortune 50, you could even say Fortune 100, man, they're so good, right? I mean, I get on a Delta flight and I see Coca-Cola, Kind Bars, Snyder Pretzels, right? Like, they're all the top brands are partnering so well, and they're learning how to trade off each other's equity and the way that they can win-win without that. It's the lesser brands who are still catching up, if you will.
That's really good. You said so many good things there. One of the things I want to highlight is my own conviction around. I would not have put relational capital second if it were me designing the system, right? That's where I would have gotten out of order. And one of the biggest observations in the last 10 years or so of leading a couple different businesses is that people have a very hard time collaborating. I think, and I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on this. A lot of it has to do with high control, the desire to maintain high levels of control, and the fact that collaboration requires us to release some of that control and to trust uh, the partner that we're collaborating with. Now, that on the other hand, though, is we also recognize, and Brandon, when you do cultural exegesis, which I think is one of the best talks you have in your repertoire, it's something I wish we could do a 2-hour documentary on with you and just have you walk through the last 3 generations of business and of economy and unpack for people the fact that we're a generation. If you're millennial, Gen Z, you're a generation of relational capital. And some of us are kind of caught in this paradox of being highly relational, community oriented, and yet at the same time extremely fearful and distrusting of institutions, and of people, especially people in authority. So, how do you help leaders understand where they find themselves culturally and why, in particular, this question of relational capital is so critical in business today?
Great question. So, in a nutshell, the boomer generation grew up with intellectual capital being the currency. Information was scarce and expensive. And so you could be a jerk, you could screw people over, but if you were the smartest person in the room, you were probably going to get promoted,
Mm.
right? And so that created all levels of toxicity, in work culture. But Al Gore invented the internet in the late 1990s, and for the last 25 years, a generation has grown up where it's not about intellectual capital because what was scarce and expensive is now available and free, right?
Mhm.
So if you're a PhD in the Civil War, well, who cares? I can Google it and come up with 5 facts published yesterday that you didn't know about, right? So all of a sudden, overnight, information shifted from one currency to another. The problem with the relational capital currency is no one trusts big anymore, right? Big is out, boutique is in. We don't trust big box stores, we don't trust big government, we don't trust big corporations, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's actually not who you know, it's who can I trust? That's the $1,000 question everyone's asking. Well, what do you trust? Well, you trust what you know, right? So all of a sudden, we went from Wall Street to Main Street, right? We trust the regional wine, we trust the local shop, the craft beer, right? Because we can get to the source, right? That's what matters, and I can know the source, and that's why I don't trust big media companies, right? And so all of a sudden, if you play your cards right, with transparency and authenticity, right, the regional and the local can win, right? And I'm going to bypass Starbucks and I'm going to go to the local coffee shop. I'm truly am going to buy, at the local retail store, for example. And so and thanks to social media, I can get my word out, and there's a bit of a level playing field than the big box advertisers. And so, how do you break that down to a small level, a team level, when you've got a 30 something working with a 60 something, for example? And how do we do that? Well, it's through vulnerability and transparency. It's the only way.
So true.
Brene Brown has it right. The reality is through vulnerability and transparency that you share, and then that has to be met with empathy and curiosity and kindness. And so, if my vulnerability and transparency is met with empathy, curiosity, and kindness, then the conversation can be taken deeper, and we truly can, as Covey said, seek first to understand, and then to be understood. And now, with a deeper understanding, and tools like the Enneagram, Myers Briggs, like they all help too, right? But now with empathy and understanding, I don't assume and think you're a jerk, right? I get to the root of where you're coming from. And now I can engage, because here's the deal: what we don't understand, what we don't have a category for, we critique. We just do. We critique and move it away. Anything we don't understand, have a category
That's right.
for, we critique and move away. But what I do understand, I can engage and connect. I can have empathy. That's why understanding, right? It's like, oh, he's just an alcoholic, whatever, what a screw up. Well, hey, wait a minute. I hear your story, I hear your upbringing, I hear your wounds, your scars. Yeah, I'd probably be an alcoholic too. Right? Let's lean in. Let's go have a beer. I mean, wait a minute. No, no. Let's go have a tea. Right? And let's go talk. Right? But unless we're curious and kind, and we're getting deeper, right? We're gonna judge and move
Mm.
away. So it takes a lot of hard work.
That's so good. Taylor and I are working on getting a non-alcoholic beer sponsor, by the way, Brandon. So you'll appreciate that. That way we can still talk beer, but there's no alcohol involved, so the alcoholics are safe to participate.
Yeah,
That's
fair
right.
enough. Well
Love it.
done.
Love it. No, man, you said that so well. It's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. That the cultural shift in knowledge and knowledge going from power to, well, now that power is distributed amongst everybody, right? So if you're going to lead, it's not necessarily about knowledge and that power, but empathy and curiosity and understanding and leaning in, which is wonderful. It's part of the reason we started the Daily Leader. We want to stay curious
That's right.
about how people are pulling this off. So I am curious, pressing in on that just a little bit more. Um, what makes that, like, what makes leader, like, what is so difficult about leadership? Like, clearly there is a market for needing like people needing to be taught leadership, right? This is why Five Capitals exists. um, but it just doesn't seem like it's just not that easy to find. So what is it that makes leading a team and leading a company, and even leading yourself so difficult?
A couple things I'd say. First is there's so much pressure from the get go on
Mm.
most leaders. And so you miss a lot of the important for the urgent. And
Hmm.
so we're short we're short on emails a lot, right? Just kind of short, quick responses. Emails are on time, our meetings, for example, are kind of quick, fast paced, make it happen, get it done. And so there's a pressure component. There's also a proximity component, right? And working from home has not done leadership any favors. There are so many people that you don't get the coffee pot time. There's no opportunity to waste time with people. Relationships are formed through time wasting.
Mm.
I just talked
Hmm.
to a good leader yesterday, and I said, you've been, with your integrator, your COO, for how many years? You've got a great relationship. How did you do it? And they started talking to me about how 18 years ago they went on this road trip, to Florida to go speak at a conference, and they had the 10 hours there, the 10 hours back. And it takes about 100 hours to make a good friend,
Hmm.
right? 100 hours to make a good
Wow.
friend, right? 10,000 hours to master something. And so
Yeah.
you can't, so there's pressure, there's proximity, right? You can't short skirt the time it takes to just be with people, to get to know people. And this psychology is why, a lot of these companies are like, yeah, I know we're the big bad wolf, but you got to come in at least twice a week, right? We got to see you I know you just want to stay in your PJs and work from home, right? But they all know that if we're going to do this, right, if we're going to have any chance, right, we've got to get that time around each other. That's why conventions are back, conferences are back, and
Mm.
and all those cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you can't short circuit the face to face. There's a study done that actually Zoom helped sponsor, that there are certain neurons and connections and firings that just don't happen when you're over Zoom. They just your body knows we're not in the same room together. Now there's a level of connection, and I'm certainly grateful for the technology, but it certainly doesn't replace that
Mm.
eyeball to eyeball neuron firing that happens when you're in the same room together.
Yeah.
And so I think proximity, pressure, and then apprenticeship, right? Leaders evolve and happen over time. And the example I always love to use is how much time Joshua was with Moses before he was given the mantle. It's estimated, 20, 30 years at least was he kind of the number two. And Tim Cook is a great modern day example. He
Hmm.
was with Steve Jobs for so long, decade long, before his untimely death. And then Tim was able to step in. And so, there's just things that we can't short circuit or short change. And when we attempt to, over time, there's carnage.
That's so good. I love that. Pressure, proximity, and apprenticeship. I'm a sports guy and I love going to sports because Brad has no idea what I'm talking about. But you see this all the time. I mean, I see a lot of times in like coaching in the NFL, which I watch all the time. They have a lot of pressure. They have very little time to succeed, and they may or may not have been mentored by somebody, and they end up burning out. And you see this
That's good.
constant turnover, right? So they can't lead their leadership and organization. And a lot of the same organizations in that they tend to stay bad until they can figure that out, right? Until they can find somebody who's been an apprentice to somebody else who's done it successfully, until they give them a little bit of that, like, time back, and they can, it, the pressure to succeed is not, hey, you've got to do this within half a year. I'll speak for me. I have no patience. I think that the internet, COVID, all these different things that have happened, my patience, however much it was in the early 2000s, that bandwidth has continued to shrink because I can get Grubhub delivering to my door in about 30 seconds for the meal that I want. So I love that idea of pressure, proximity, and apprenticeship to being some of the biggest barriers of good leadership. So
Mhm.
I have tons more questions on here. I know we kind of got to wrap up. Brad, do you want to kind of tie a bow on us? You got a question you want to end on as we're wrapping up here?
Yeah, Brandon, I've had the privilege of meeting your daughters, right? And thinking about the fact that Taylor has twins on the way, which
Two
literally
twin girls. Yeah,
I
here we
I
go.
perspire as I speak those very words for you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Um, I've got a, our third on the way here, and so much of I think the passion that Taylor and I share for the Daily Leader is really helping that next generation of leaders, really being in that apprenticeship space where Taylor and I actually went through an apprenticeship program together, and we learned a lot about what to do really well, what not to do in that context. And so I think about our daughters, I think about my son, and if there's anyone in my life who would be able to help me see into the next 25 years around where do we need to be thinking in terms of leadership, it's you. What would you say as we look at developing at this apprenticeship opportunity that we have with our children and these other emerging leaders in our lives? What do we need to be looking at as we help equip and prepare them to sort of take the reins from us here in the next 20-25 years?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I get, every once in a while. So I've had a little chance to kind of think about that, and also think about, well, what am I doing and prioritizing, with my kids, the future, the next generation, and so I've got three C words that, so it's kind of pithy, goes together, but it is generally the three categories that I think are most important that I'm working on. The first one is communication, right? So being able to hold a room. I'm so grateful for my early kind of FFA 4-H days, speaking in front of a classroom days, running for class president, giving a speech. Effective communication is priority number one for me. So doing all the things to kind of present in our living room, to present at Girl Scouts, like we're working hard on communication, putting together a great talk, and being able to hold a room effectively is the first one. The second one is really good connection, right? So we work on, at 11 years old, at 6 years old, we work on looking each other in the eyes and a good handshake, and how to hold a conversation with someone, and asking good questions and being curious. And hey, we went to that neighborhood party. What did you learn? What grown-ups did you talk to? You know, um, 11-year-old being able to interact with one of my clients and saying, oh, tell me what a CEO does. What is a CEO? Right. So that kind of kindness and curiosity, questions and conversation, that reciprocity back and forth, being able to talk about yourself as well as share with others. And so communication, connection, and then coaching, right? Being able to give feedback back to others in a life-giving, non-weird way, and to be able to ask for and receive coaching, right? So being humble and teachable, and being humble and teachable with your mom, as well as with a babysitter, to a teacher's feedback, right? How do you hold your identity and not get all kind of wobbly because you got bad feedback from your coach, or a teacher, or whatnot. We need to be able to give and receive feedback in life giving ways if we're going to really be honest about growing, evolving, getting better, reinventing ourselves every 5 to 7 years. And so, if my kids are great communicators, they know how to connect and engage in authentic and meaningful ways, and give and receive coaching. I think that's going to set themselves up to be learners and connectors and leaders in these coming seasons.
That's really
That's
good. I don't hear you saying anything about AI, about social media, about cryptocurrency, about Web 3.0, about wearing some sort of chip in your brain. I hear you talking about, as the onslaught of all these technology things happen, we actually have to stay human, and we actually have to anchor down in communicate, connect, and coach. And so that's an encouragement to me. That tells me that Taylor and I were, man, we're on the right track as we engage in these conversations with leaders. Brandon, is there any final thoughts that you have to share with our audience? And as well, where can they find you if they want to follow along with your journey?
Yeah, that's easy. So 5capitals.net, FIVE, 5capitals.net, and you can connect and interact with us in a variety of ways. Um, I think if I were to give any final advice, it would just be to make sure you prioritize fun in 2024. Most of the leaders I work with aren't having very much fun. They're not very fun people. Nobody's happy. They need a good rest over the holidays. And so, what are you going to do next year with is experiences? Is it days off? Is it doing great things with your kids or friends, or guys trip, girls trip? But everyone should be prioritizing and making sure fun and joy happen, because they're few and fleeting moments. Most people handle kind of sorrow, depression, gossip, negativity way, way easier than they handle joy. And so you have to fight for joy and fight for fun. And as leaders who go first and go out for fun, go out in front. That's what we should be going after and modeling in real and authentic, prioritized ways into 2024.
That's so good. I love hearing that because I could use some more fun in my life, and I think we all could, right? Just stop getting dragged down and
That's right.
and start learning how to have a good time. It's John 10:10, right? If we're doing it, like the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. So, Brandon, man, thank you so much for taking the time to be with Brad and myself here at the Daily Leader. Like we said, you can get all of that information as well down in the show notes from today. So, yeah, please come back, Brandon. We'd love to have you back. Hopefully, at some point here. I know this is almost, I mean, so much good content, and yet you've got so much more to give. So, hopefully, we'll see you back on the Daily Leader. Until then, like and subscribe, y'all, and we'll see you next time.